majority Muslim countries like Turkey, there's a vast interest in this case, which is why they've sent such a large and significant delegation, including the Vice President and the Foreign Minister, expected to arrive in the next few hours. Now, the alleged shooter, it's believed that he travelled to Turkey at least twice in 2016. On one occasion, he stayed for 43 days. He also mentioned the Turkish President, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, in that rambling 72-page manifesto that he printed. So Turkey has a strong interest and concern in the case about what links the alleged shooter had to Turkey. The President, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has also come out and spoken about Turkish concern about rising Islamophobia across Europe, also spreading in countries like Australia and New Zealand, saying that the Western world needs to pull together to try and target that. And that's why we'll see this delegation arriving here in the next few hours.
Nicole, many New Zealanders, myself included, have always seen and espoused the country as a place that's very safe, that's very far away from this kind of hatred, this kind of violence. Is the international concern that the rise of hate crimes and hate speech is leading to more of these attacks? And do you think we're seeing that kind of polarisation in New Zealand? Perhaps the belief that we were excluded from this kind of violence was a naivety of sorts.
Most New Zealanders would say or had believed that they were exempt from many of the problems of the rest of the world in terms of rising Islamophobia, concern about refugees and mass migration. New Zealand has a centrist government. It's been welcoming of refugees. It hasn't faced these kind of problems before. Obviously, in neighbouring Australia, it's been a far more polarised political environment. The refugee debate there in terms of arrivals of boat people and offshore processing for asylum seekers has meant that the political debate, the rhetoric in Australia, has been far stronger and more divisive across the country. But what we're seeing here in New Zealand now is many people trying to pull together to say that they won't allow the country to be pulled in the direction of Europe and the United States, where we have seen such heated debate about mass migration since hundreds of thousands of refugees have fled from war-torn countries, especially Syria and Iraq, and of course in the United States as well. Over the last few years, under US President Donald Trump, we have seen heated political debate, rising hate crime and hate speech. Just to remind some of our viewers, of course, we had that mass shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. So yes, it has come as a great shock to the people of New Zealand to have something like this happen on their doorstep, a small country, geographically isolated and ordinarily very far from the problems that we've seen in other parts of the world.
Nicole, behind you, you can see there's a cord in there and there's a large number of flowers, messages, I imagine, that have been written there. What are you seeing on the ground there? What's the feeling amongst the people there, the Cantabrians?
Well, most people here, as you've been saying, are still sort of recovering from the shock of something like this. The streets have been quiet, but people have been coming down to pay their respects, to show solidarity, to pull together, as I said. It's a great shock for the country of New Zealand. And also in Australia too, we have seen, and we will again today, large gatherings at some of the various religious institutions, both Christian churches as well as mosques and synagogues. At this stage, though, people are really just sort of trying to come to terms with what has happened.
What's the response been from the New Zealand public to the Prime Minister's response? Because yesterday we saw her, she went and spoke to the Muslim community there, she wore a head covering. What's the response been to her response?
According to the New Zealanders I've spoken to over the last few hours since I've arrived here, many of them have said that they're impressed with how their Prime Minister has handled it. They believe that she's been composed, respectful, that she has sort of, as I said, tried to pull the country together. trying not to show a division in society here. They are pleased that they saw her speaking to Muslim leaders. So the reaction from New Zealanders has been one where they have really tried to unite together, trying to sort of bridge the divide between the various ethnic and religious groups in this country, remembering, of course, that the Muslim community is a small component of New Zealand. It's only about 1%. So the New Zealanders I've spoken to have said that they are impressed with how their Prime Minister has handled that, and they expect to see more of that over the next few days and weeks.